YouTubers, tnartist.here, Brett Tadlock. My website's tnartist.me. So I appreciate you jumping over to my channel. I hope you enjoy these tutorials I'm putting up on here. Going to show you some of my processes. So what you're looking at right here is a quick painting that I did. It took me about 45 minutes to do it, so I've got it sped up so that you're only going to watch it in about a quarter of the time. But I laid this in here so that way I could practice. What I was doing was trying to practice creating some clouds and creating mountains. So this is going to be a mountain scene. And what I've done here is a lot like I would normally do for one of my traditional paintings on a canvas. So I've added some background color to get rid of the white of the canvas. And then what I've started doing is taking a lighter tone of the blue that is the background and laying in my clouds here. Now what I did for the clouds, I took the oil paint brush and drew a rough shape and then took the palette knife and smeared it out. I'm using all the default settings within Artrage 5, so that way anybody that has the program can just do it straight out of the box. They don't have to worry about, well, what custom brush and what setting and blah, blah, blah to use. I'm not using any of that here. I'm just, like I said, straight out of the box with what's there, and using the airbrush, the oil brush, and the palette knife for this entire thing, and the selection tool. To give you an idea real quick about some of the common questions I get asked, that's one of them. What settings do you use and so forth? So just go with whatever's there. How many layers? There are 7 layers that I used in this painting. And the only reason I usually tend to jump to another layer is because if it's something that I'm not sure I want to add, then I'm not affecting the paint below it, and I can just delete the layer. Also, in Artrage, it has a tendency, if you lay down a lot of oil paint and then put oil paint on top of it and try to use the palette knife to smear it out or blend it, sometimes it can cause the color to get to a kind of a burned out kind of a thing where the hue goes way too high. So I've jumped to a second layer here after doing the clouds, laid in some base color, a nice mid-tone purplish color for the shadows, and then I started playing around with the airbrush, trying to figure out if I liked the way it looked or not to get a general shape of the mountain that this is going to be. This is going to be a mountain in the background. So I'm trying not to spend a lot of time on it and a lot of detail, but that's actually one of the things I can get myself caught up into, is playing around with the highlights and everything and overworking it. So I try to, again, just think general shapes, general shadows and highlights. And also, one of the bigger influences on me is N.C. Wyeth. And I love the way that his stuff looks, where he's got some of those purples and yellowish and oranges and stuff for highlights and all that. So that's what I've done here. The shadow color that I laid over for the darker part right there was a orangish brown that's smeared into the purple and gives that really interesting color right there. And then I went over to a lighter value, but staying in the same color, and it started adding these highlights. So it gives that really interesting play of tones. So, but again, wanted to realize that it was getting very monotone, and just not looking enough depth to it. So I started going back and adding in some darker colors, and I have the layer set to where transparency is locked, so I don't have to worry about the edges, and I can keep that nice crisp edge and play around with the palette knife and smear it out. So I've done all that, and now I'm wanting to play around with some of the highlights. Again, reminding myself not to overdo it in the background, that this is just going to be pushed back, and I'm going to go back later and airbrush a little bit of the neutral bluish purplish color over top of it to push it back even more. But I did want to give some more depth to it. So now I've jumped to another layer, and I'm going to just lay in the color with the paint bucket tool. One of the weird things I've noticed with Artrage, and I can't figure out why it's doing this, I've looked in the settings, but sometimes when I do it on a new layer, do the paint bucket, it gives it that lower transparency. So these are going to be the foreground mountains. Now I've gone to back down to the mountain layer, the background mountain layer, and I'm airbrushing in some clouds. And then I realized it just kind of fades into nothing, so I'll go back and put in some shadows into it to kind of hint at more mountain below that. Not really wanting to get overly invested in it for the look. So here's where I put in those tones to make it look like there's something below the mist. More mountains and more rock. So it just gives it more of a feel that there's something down there, and not overly worrying about it. So then I jump back up to the mountains in the foreground and start playing with that. And whenever you're doing these mountains in the foreground, start with a dark color go a few shades lighter, and then start laying in some just real light tones on it, and just play around with what you want it to look like. Right now I'm just adding some more highlights to the mist, but here you go. You can see where I'm starting to add some highlights to the rock and where I think snow is going to be. I started laying the snow first, and I thought, nah, I'm going to go back and lay in rocks. And so, again, just laying in some lighter tones for the rocks here, and then smearing it out with the poly knife. Trying to stay very loose, trying to not let myself repeat the same pattern over and over. That's a habit that we as humans usually do. We just we look for not habits, but we look for patterns and try to make them again. And but I was just trying to go for general shapes. And so when you're doing shadows and stuff, throw in blues, throw in some greens, throw in some different colors, because especially if you're going to be doing snow, it's going to reflect back a lot of different color. And then if that's got some lighter shadow on top of it, it can really help play around with the depth of it and make it look a lot more interesting than just like a white or something like that. So you don't ever want to do just a straight white, because even these, like the highlights on that mountain back there, that's not white. That's actually just a really light yellowish color. So laying in some purples, laying in some oranges and blues and greens, and just playing around with the shadow colors. Again, just a couple steps up on value, so that way I can see a difference, and playing around with where I think some rocks are going to be, and looking for some shapes. And by being real loose about it, makes it easier to go back and look for where you should highlight and what you should leave, and so forth. So that's what I'm doing right here. I'm adding in the blues and all that, and playing around again with the oil brush and the airbrush. Mainly the oil brush at this point, but looking for the highlights now, trying to find those random patterns. And I wanted this to be a natural bridge going across here, like a rock bridge. So I'll play around with that, make it look like it's some light coming through it, and then trying to push the front boulder to look a little darker and separate it out. And going back and forth with the light and the dark, push the pole, and adding in the highlights here, and so forth. So the key to it with, honestly, if this was a traditional oil painting or acrylic painting, a lot of the stuff would be a little bit easier. But one of the things I do love about it is that doing it digitally, it frees me up to not feel like I'm wasting any paint or anything, so I can just play around more. So I can take the time to go in and play with these things like this and get the colors and so forth to do. And a lot of times it'll translate over to my actual traditional paintings when I decide to go that route. So I've got this purplish color here laying in for where the snow is going to be, and trying to make it drift up on the sides, and going back and adding highlights. I've got about 5 or 6 different tones to the snow of itself, just different grays and lighter gray, and then a lighter one, and so forth. Again, pushing and pulling, trying to think how the light should cascade across this or not. So right here I'm adding in a hole in the side of the mountain wall. Wasn't sure if I wanted it to be a portal or just a hole. So I thought, I do kind of like the idea of it being like some sort of mystical portal. So I added that in there. That's why it takes on that different color. And then right now I'm masking off the boulder in the front here, and then I'll mask off some of the land bridge and some of the colors to the right of it, because I'm trying to break up the browns and give a little bit more rock shapes, and trying to play around with that. So that's what I'm doing right there. And you can see I've got it masked off right here. And that's a great way to get some of that texture that you normally would just get from a paintbrush, is by masking it off just a generic shape, throw in some darks, look for some light areas, and then push and pull the lights and the darks again. So, but it is starting to take shape. And again, it's just, looking for those colors, trying not to jump to one end of the highlight spectrum or the shadow spectrum immediately. And moving all around the painting, you'll notice I don't tend to stay in one particular area. I'm trying to bounce around and pull the whole thing together, making sure that I'm repeating the colors throughout the painting, so that it has that different, it has that tie together. So again, here it becomes the portal. And one of the things I realized with this later on, that I went back, that yellowish glow should have been cast more on the sides there and brought into it. So I did go back later on the finished version and played around with it some more and did that. So, and now I'm trying to add in some mist, some clouds. This is the mountain in the back. So this mountain that I'm putting in here is actually between the other background mountain and the sky layer. So that way it's just kind of hidden back there. And Then I'm dropping down to the rocks again, looking for more highlights, more areas to push into darkness and really get that contrast and the buildup of values and colors and everything else. So here in a second, you're going to see that I play around with some dragon shapes. I wasn't real sure if I ever wanted to add dragon to it or not, but I decided I did. But I knew that I was going to want to shrink it, so I just threw a random shape in there. I didn't like it, took it back out, added it back, and then just started playing around with the shapes. And this happens, I don't know if you've ever done that or not, but I didn't have this part planned out at all, really. I really didn't have any of this planned out. I was just kind of playing around. But there's several times throughout this I should have stopped messing with it and just, changed the size of it and threw it up in the background. Like right about there is a good way. But then it becomes the pterodactyl dragon here in just a second. And there it is. So I just played around. I was like, what the heck with it? I'm spending too much time on this. So I just shrunk it, threw it up there in the sky. This one I had a little bit more idea of what shape I wanted to go with. Still wasn't overly fond of it, but again, shrunk it, threw it up there in the sky, and then faded it back into the background. Because I never wanted this to be just the primary focus of those dragons. I just wanted it to be a hint that they're off in the distance. So there you go. A nice mountain pass, playing around with the rocks and the pushing and pulling of the atmospheric perspective and all that. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you got something out of it. Please leave any comments or suggestions or thoughts that you have down below in the comments. Come visit me on Facebook at the TN Artist. TN Artist is where you can find me. It's the TN Artist on Facebook. And you can come to my website and find it from there, tnartist.me. That's TNARTIST.me. Visit me there. Please subscribe. Please share with your friends. And again, leave me any comments, questions, or suggestions. I try to get back to you as fast as I can and answer. I'm more than happy to help with any kind of ideas you have. And if there's things that you want to see or learn, let me know that too. I'm trying to work on a series of doing that right now. So let me know. I appreciate it. Thanks.